razem z wanilią i inne dobre rzeczy i cukier oczywiście. Zmieszane razem, żeby było pyszne. What's going on, everybody? Pete Furious Talks, another Polish language lesson. Witam was wszystkich w Polsce, w Kanadzie i na całym świecie. Today we're going to be going over Wigilia, Christmas Eve dinner. Wigilia is, well, it's a tradition that everyone has in Poland where they have a 12-course dinner. And what I want to go over today is what that entire 12-course meal actually entails. Now every single year the same thing happens in my house. About a week before Christmas Eve we have something called bigos that starts to get made. That is right, bigos. Bigos. And what goes into bigos is kapusta kwaszona. Kapusta. Now what is this kapusta kwaszona basically is sauerkraut. Very, very simple. What we take is jars and jars of sauerkraut, cut up a little bit of fresh cabbage in there, and we cook it for days on end. And what comes out of it is bigos. Something that looks absolutely disgusting according to all my friends, but tastes lovely. Now what's amazing about bigos is we put grzyby, wino, kiełbasę, śliwki, and a whole ton of other stuff afterwards, after Christmas Eve is done. Now, what happens during Christmas Eve is we can't eat meat. And so for actual Christmas, we actually have kapusta with grzyby. So we have just the sauerkraut with the mushrooms being cooked for hours on end, and that's what we eat for Christmas Eve. And after that, we add in leftover meats for about a week or two after that. It just keeps getting cooked with a ton of leftover meats and it becomes delicious. That aside, I wanted to go over all the details in every single meal that we have during Christmas Eve. Now, I never looked online what an actual 12-course meal looks like for typical Polacks. I simply went by what we have at home. And what we have at home is simply, we start off with something called śledzie. Say it with me, everybody. Śledzie. Śledzie. Something that I absolutely despise as an individual, which is pickled herring. People like Maldiva absolutely enjoy it. People like normal Polish people really, really love it. The only way I ever think it is possible to eat pickled herring or śledzie is with a little bit of vodka. Vodka. Say it with me, vodka. Probably the easiest word you'll ever learn except for kurwa. And along with śledzie, we have chleb. And chleb is simply bread. It's considered a meal for some people. So we have chleb, we have śledzie, we have, in our tradition, we have something called jarzynowa sałata. And basically it's a bunch of chopped vegetables, potatoes, peas, and mayonnaise. Mel, is it called a Russian salad?
Yes.
A Russian salad. So mayonnaise and vegetables is apparently a very, very good dish to have. Along with that, we bring out ryba w galaretcie. Ryba w galaretcie. And what is the ryba w galaretcie? Basically, we take a fish and we put it into jello. Not fruity jello, just gelatin. Put some vegetables inside there. Another delicacy that I try not to eat. Soup is either barszcz. Barszcz is simply beet soup. Every time my friends would come over, they would have barszcz. Actually, no, they wouldn't, because they would go, I don't like this stuff. If you don't like beet soup, we have grzybowa zupa, which is mushroom soup. Very often in the Polish tradition, you'll take dried mushrooms from the Polish forest and you'll cook that up for hours on end. But that is called grzybowa zupa. Very often they'll put uszka inside the soup. And when you hear uszka, this actually has a lot of meanings. Well, two meanings that I know of. Uszka can actually mean ears. And in this situation actually means dumpling. So you have a dumpling filled with sauerkraut and mushrooms. Sometimes, apparently, they make croquette. Now, croquette are simply just potato pancakes that they'll eat with this as well. So like hash browns, maybe. But if you say croquette, they just sound that much more delicious and healthy, don't they? We move to pierogi, smażone pierogi. So they actually have to serve, for whatever reason, they have to serve the most disgusting pierogi on Christmas Eve. Rather than actually having it with meat, with fruit, with delicious sweet cheese, they have to put cabbage and mushrooms in there again. Now when you're done with all these cabbage and mushrooms in your pierogi, we move on to bigos. What's in bigos? Cabbage and mushrooms. So that is three courses in a row with cabbage and mushrooms. It totally makes sense now, doesn't it, for all us Polish people. After that, we moved on to fish and potatoes. Usually in Polish tradition, they usually use carp, simply because it doesn't taste great. No, simply because as most Polish people growing up, they weren't necessarily the most wealthiest of individuals. Carp would be the most easily attainable and therefore most widely used in Poland. After that, we move on to the good stuff. The good stuff being the sweets. Now we have makowiec. Now makowiec contains, it's basically a poppy seed cake. Now the more poppy seed, more mak that you use, which is poppy seeds mixed up with honey, raisins, egg, deliciousness, the more of that you put into the cake, the more delicious it becomes. So we have makowiec razem z jajkami, razem z rodzynkami, razem z wanilią i inne dobre rzeczy i cukier oczywiście, zmieszane razem, żeby było pyszne. Now another course that a lot of Polish people will have is something called kutia. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, because as somebody that's never had this meal, I'm just guessing that it's kutia. Basically what that is unprocessed wheat grains, cooked poppy seeds, honey, dried or candied fruit soaked in a small amount of port or red wine, and various nuts, usually almonds, sunflower grains, or walnuts. Now this sounds absolutely fantastic, and I'm quite pissed off that over the past 30 years, I was never introduced to this meal. This sounds like the best heavenly meal that there could be, and unfortunately, I have not had the pleasure of trying it, and maybe one day I will. Another common meal that a lot of individuals will have is piernik. Now we have piernik, which is simply a gingerbread cake. We will sometimes make cookies and gingerbread weeks beforehand because this actually gets preserved pretty easily. And even if it dries up, it's still delicious. Very often, a lot of people also have kompot susza. Kompot susza. Say that word, my friends. Susza. Susza. Susza is basically, it just means kompot, which is, kompot is a drink that Polish people will make from fruits very often. So they will soak fruits in water for days on end and take all the sugars and flavors out of there to create a beverage. Susza means just dried objects. So we have dried fruits, dried whatever, dried raisins, all that. They'll put that into their little canister container, soak it with water, and make this juice. Kompot is also something I've been deprived of during Christmas Eve. Mom, Dad, explain yourself. I want some kompot. Another dish which I'm pleasantly surprised we actually don't have, because whenever I go to Melissa's house for Serbian Christmas, we actually have it. It is gołąbki. Gołąbki. Now when I heard gołąbki when I was a child, I actually thought that these were like pigeons. Gołąbki actually sounds very similar to pigeons in the Polish language, and gołąbki are actually just cabbage rolls. Now, we've never had cabbage rolls for Christmas Eve either, so I'm trying to think exactly what we're doing here in Canada. We're not having the proper Christmas Eve. People from all over Poland will actually have different traditions. So people from the far east in Poland will have certain meals, certain dishes during the Christmas Eve. People from the west, north, south will also have different kinds of dishes. And to top it off, before we begin all these meals, we have something called opłatek. Now, opłatek is simply the body of Christ. When you go to church, you get the wafer, the bread wafer, the delicious wafer that you have every time you go to church. And to be honest, I wish that was a full course on its own, because those things are delicious. You spread some jam on top or some peanut butter or anything else and it tastes absolutely phenomenal. Too bad we couldn't just have a little piece every single time. So yeah, as Polish people, we eat weird and delicious things, weird and not so delicious things, and weird things. Good part is, if you don't like certain foods in Wigilia or whenever it may be, as a Polak, you always have a bottle of vodka within at least a meter of yourself at all times. And therefore you can chase down anything that you don't like with that delicious frosty bottle. And there you go, my friends, that is Wigilia. Although you may have not learned too many Polish words today or Polish phrases, you learned all about the Polish culture and the weird things that we eat and weird things that maybe you should try one day. Wigilia! Merry Christmas, my friends. Thank you very much for watching. I wish you all the best. Happy holidays to everyone in this world, especially all you Polacks watching right now, because I know you're watching. Polish language lessons where more Polish people watch than anyone else. You guys stay sexy, stay hungry, and of course, get laid, my friends. Boom! Boom!
I zasrany. Ale kurwa, on był pierdolony I zasrany wczoraj, nie zgadzasz się? All, of course, can be related to the drunk context of the way you are acting on a regular basis, especially if you are in Poland and drinking vodka and beer. It's true. It's how people behave.